Chapter 8. When the waters opened tongues. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. Acts 2, 4-5. Between moonlit flowers beckoned the narrow trail, barely wide enough for Rohan's feet. It was relatively straight, but he could only see a portion maybe as far as a sprint would take him. Then the flowers or a hillside occluded it. The hills wound irregularly, like snakes bigger than dragons under the flowers. Sometimes they would turn at right angles, making an arc, before returning to their course, leading inward toward the greatest tree Rohan ever encountered. It was not quite as high as the mountains, truly, but it was a pier with them, rising a third the height of them, rising a third their height at least. Its canopy nearly reached foothills, and it grew larger as Rohan approached. The ground was drawn up around this great tree, and the path apparently led straight to it, though he couldn't quite see far enough to be sure. The hills snaked as they did, because they were really the root system of the behemoth, hidden under veil of flower. With each hill, Rohan wondered that he seemed no closer, and yet the tree seemed so much larger. He must have been walking amidst fireflies and flowers for hours, but as Vaeta said, there was no change in the sky, no morning. It was good there was a bright moon behind the tree, or Rohan wondered how well he could have seen anything. As it stood, the moon was bright enough he had the mildest shadow trailing behind. He wondered at the flowers. How could they be open and colorful with no sun? Yet they were, and of many hues, though muted in the moonlight. He saw many of the kind used in taming dragons, a rare sort only capable of flourishing under certain conditions. Here they thrived. How? When were they planted? When did they bloom? And how would he know the interval of time he spent in this place? At length, Rohan got close enough to the tree to see movement in its branches. Its trunk was a tenth as wide as it was high, and had two colors twisting in and out of one another, a gold and a purple, it seemed, though he wondered how they would differ in daylight. They could have been different kinds of wood from the world he knew, but indeed both retained a unique veneer suggesting gold and purple. He began to notice a quality to the flowers as he followed the rolling path. Some complemented the golden coloration of the tree, some the purple. Rohan wondered if there were some floral relationship between them. He also wondered what spices may be found in such blooms. Beyond slave flower, key, and dragon breaking, he saw many things that would trance the minds of men. Somehow, after hours of walking, he was not tired and needed no immediate rest, so he could not find an excuse to explore the possibilities contained in the flora, not in contrast to the curiosities ahead. But he remembered what he saw. The path drew him onward to the tree. Feeling so little fatigue, he wondered if he should run. Would he retain his breath longer than usual in the thick air? Rohan started a fast pace and was gratified to find he could maintain it. Would his journey end beyond the tree? Was that where began the pre-dawn Advaita spoke of, indicating the halfway point of his journey? As he got closer, he could perceive increasing movement among the giant's branches. Perhaps it hid a village of its own. This certainly was a possible use for the gargantuan thing. It was large enough to house a nation. The path led up the mound of the tree's base, increasingly steeped. Despite the angle of it, Rohan had little trouble keeping a brisk pace until he realized great time must have passed. He could feel sweat on his brow. He slowed to a walk, coming near enough to gauge the true size of the tree. It couldn't be less than the width of 40 men, laying head to toe in a line, and again 10 times that length high. Here was a true monster. As he approached the base of the tree, the moonlight became weaker, but leaked through titanic branches in occasional rays. Activity of flitting purple and golden shapes increased, and what residents of the tree there were apparently hung lights around two paths, one stretching right, one left, both hugging the trunk of the tree closely and spiraling up its sides to the canopy above. Rohan noticed at the base of the tree where the paths began that there was a particularly bright golden and purple glow, As he came closer, he realized it came from two shapes that weren't immediately identifiable to the eye. They exhibited some sort of chaos he couldn't make sense of. Multiple faces, multiple limbs, many wings, something divine about one, something malevolent about the other. But even as he stared, their forms coagulated and transformed, becoming two who would have been of the greatest stature among men, two standing guard, one by the golden path, the other by the dark, both of which were sparsely lit along their expanse up the tree. "Guardians of this impossible behemoth," Rohan called as he approached, "I come to find the city of the Timeless One spoken of by Advaita, who has given me this task." Rohan felt what would be a reassuring smile, but not of physicality, of illumination. He saw it on the Golden One, but at the same time he did not. He heard the voice of the Golden One. "Then you have a long journey." Now a sound like a vague hissing, mixed with a moan, came from the Violet One, whose hue was a color that was somehow nauseating. Rohan couldn't describe it. It was purple, but not royal, not violet, not indigo. Somehow it was like the absence of light. The hissing one said, "I can save you trouble with your burden. Give it to me." "Oh, you think I have a burden, do you?" Rohan quipped. Advaita said none knew of the golden crystal cube. What was this? "If there is a man here, then his business, it is a burden," came the reply. "Mind him not," interjected the Golden One. "If you were given a task, then the task is yours." So the nauseating one was fishing for information. Rohan said his next words carefully. "Be that as it may, could I refresh myself in the community of this tree for a time?" "No," said the Golden One, swiftly and forcefully. The other seemed to project an emotion of sarcasm, the psychic equivalent of rolled eyes. Rohan blinked. "This tree's roots stretch to the waters beyond, for it feeds on the humanity sea, from which you came, a sea of knowledge, good and evil," explained the Golden One. "We keepers of the tree maintain that which is known by such beings. This tree is the embodiment and fulfillment of all human knowledge, so its curators are separated, the one sort of knowledge from the other. The fruits to be found here have already done enough to trouble mankind, so it is no longer man's province. Those who come to this tree from your kind are either brought here by the Dark Ones to be consumed, or they have no business being here. In either scenario, if we find your kind in the tree, we spirit them away expediently." "He puts it so unfavorably. Why not win either way? The pain of life traded for dreams, and in return we learn from you." Despite the putrefaction of voice and look to the being, limbed in purple anti-light, Rohan found the argument intriguing. "Nightmares," interrupted Goldie. "You will not rest in dreams, but writhe in terror perpetually. As a tree's fruit is to you, so are your human emotions to them. They make many things from the pain of man. They will squeeze you dry." "Why is this here?" Rohan asked, gesturing to the great tree. "For the reason this entire place exists. Every builder has a workshop wherein he shapes his art. Here you find the workshop of the greatest builder of all, who uses time itself as media for composition." "The Timeless One," Rohan observed. "He's a faker," said the Purple One immediately. The Golden One glowed in a way that seemed less golden and more orange. "If you are so critical of the Timeless One, why do you present the form you do to the man? Are you not much more false? Why not be as you are?" "Fine," replied the Violet One, and began to change. He grew in stature, thrice the height of a man, and proportionately. His face became somehow uglier than what it was when violet, turning pale and iridescent. Imagine a man with scales for skin, and the way the light might reflect from them. His face adopted a bloated bulbous nose, and a mane of crimson sprouted high from his head. His mouth was blood, and his eyes were slit yellow like a cat's. Rohan was attentive, but not daunted, as he sensed a lie, and so readied his saber, smoothly withdrawing it from its scabbard. "What will that needle do to me?" came the voice, something deep and putrid. Rohan recalled being frightened by a small, angry dog, and decided to put the lesson he learned from the canine to work, responding with a feral scream and leaping at the giant with his sword swinging. He stabbed it through the foot where it joined the leg and felt the end of his saber come out in the wood of the tree. There was immediately a diffusion of the iridescent half-human, half-dragon colossus, like a bubble burst, leaving behind only a purple shadow and a tiny glowing violet light several feet above Rohan's head. This little light flickered, as though quite fatigued. He looked up, and a smile came to him. "It's a trick." "From his kind, yes," said the Golden One. "But he has forebears who took a celestial embodiment of the beast you have just seen, and these do have some ability to bring torment. He had a body, like he showed you. It is gone. He is only a consciousness without harbor, awaiting the final dawn. See how the illusion wearies him. He would favor inhabiting an object with motion to forcing a tangible illusion, but he cannot bridge the gap as yet. Believe me, if he could get a body, he would. They've all been trying to find a way to do that. Don't let them get in your head." "So this is the fate of the vanquished Titans. I have wondered if they were spirit or soul, and what becomes of such an essence. And you and the golden lights, messengers of the timeless one, all of you. Some await those like yourself to guide. Some have run the race and assist in the building of the city of the timeless one in what capacity they can. Some have other duties. We are varied and numerous. We do all have a message of one kind or another. Have you a name? Not for you. Not right now. When the season is right. But it is not now. You must soon resume your task, Rohan Hanuman. Fine as our conversation has been, the disembodied progeny of the fallen, though fleshless, yet retain collectivity in terms of your reckoning. This place began to be peopled by such at the end of Star Tower's rebellion, from which your tongues have been mixed. Those here have consolidated their approach at rebellion against the Timeless One over only half a year's time, though a substantially greater amount has passed in your land. They are growing all the time, Rohan Hanuman, as does this tree that drinks from the humanity sea. Any moment a calamity will come now, one that will make the gold stand out and lead to prosperity in your world. Easy living from prosperity will breed corruption and feed the dark side of this tree. Then will come the pain again, and the gold will thrive. These cycles follow one another, but become shorter all the time. The world of man and this place are at least connected in that way. Since the next growth will be a calamity, a painful thing which forces mankind to be strong and good and noble, the gold will grow. Those in management of the darkened side have abated this season, and you come at a time when there is no patriarch of the fallen to harass you as did the dragon, for they are in the earth, fooling its kings. When violet roots drink of the humanity sea, then come the dark ones to glean the knowledge and pervert it for their purposes. Out they go to deceive, and mankind overcomes through the Timeless One, so gold returns. Were the dark here, and were they to find you, they would torment you as they could before they were stopped or your journey were abridged. So, go soon before your window closes. The time is ever shorter. Rohan considered the glowing one. You know my name? "The waters of this place reveal many things," was the cryptic response. Rohan continued on his way then, and it was good he did, for he was only a few minutes down the road when he felt shaking and the path began to ripple like a rope-made whip. A bellow from a great distance came to him. "Run, Rohan!" It was the golden one at the base of the tree. Rohan ran on the path, but even as he did, it started to curve uphill and favor the trunk. A third spiral round about the tree besides the gold and purple ones guarded at the base. The tree was growing, even as he ran along the edge of the path. Now the expanding edge of its trunk. It was growing astonishingly fast. When he looked back toward the sea, even in moonlight, he saw white-capped waves, and he realized the waters had rushed inland a great distance. But even as the sea encroached the valley, the tree's growth pulled up the ground into a mound all around, even shaking nearby mountains in its fury, and it showed no sign of stopping. So the waters retreated on their advance, but they came and went in waves with the tree's growth. Whether or not it was his intention, Rohan was 5 times the span of a man up the trunk. It only took seconds, and as he tried to follow the path away, the tree kept growing. Rohan realized, despite the admonition of the golden one below, the path now led into the great tree and described a lip wide enough to drive a wind circle along the trunk, a trunk that rotated as it grew unreasonably fast. Rohan followed and saw his path was now coming to a branch, but a small one. He stepped out on that branch, and it started shooting forward with feverish speed, becoming more and more substantial under his feet as it did. He didn't know if it was a trick of his mind or part of the moonlit world, but he could see the path start stretching out from him to match the branch's growth. So he followed, and the branch expanded faster and became longer, and as he ran he began to see more and more by moonlight until the branch reached an outcropping of rock down which stretched the path, and Rohan leaped for it, jumping down to a flat face of stone that appeared bright under moonlight. Looking behind, he saw the tree continue to expand and gently turn, rising like a tent built by travelers. The lights continued to coruscate all about the lobed behemoth that drew from the humanity sea, and the good and evil contained in its waters. Rohan caught his breath, looked forward, and resumed his journey. It would be a few more hours walking inland from the tree before Rohan really felt any thirst. He heard water falling somewhere and was greeted by a stream from the mountains whose peaks were white with snow, sparkling occasionally in the moonlight. Rohan drank his fill and felt a revitalization like never before. Some unknown veil in his mind was instantaneously removed. Everything seemed brighter and began to have a greater cohesion to it somehow. It all made more sense. If this world bore any similitude to the one Rohan came from, then the water became vapor over the seas, which would become clouds, which would leave the water on the mountains, so it came down into the valleys and then back out to sea. If that was the case, the water he was drinking was some of the knowledge of which fed the tree. That would be the case with all water here. He wondered at this for a moment, having yet another epiphany. The water he just swallowed was what revealed this thing to him. With every drink came new knowledge. He looked back at the massive tree far behind now. It still grew, and he'd been walking he didn't know how long. There was a deep mystery to this world of moonlight. No hunger pangs yet intruded upon his mind. Rohan remembered fine meats and bread. He remembered savory dishes of the travelers, which combined herbs, spices, meats, and fruits. The taste was a pleasant memory, but it didn't stimulate any desire in him. Still, in a few hours, he spied a bush with leaves he recognized. Looking in, sure enough, he saw a large red berry of a tart kind he was fond of. It tasted fine, and Rohan ate a handful from the bush, but didn't need any more. When he had enough, he had enough. The path was now leading toward one of the high peaks, and Rohan wondered how much further it went, but his lack of hunger, his lack of thirst, these things made him consider it could be quite far indeed. He wondered if he could sleep for a time and what dreams he would dream. He found he could sleep as he laid himself out under a rock by the path, but the dreams that came were of the life he once knew, the life that was forever gone. Sleep was perhaps not the best idea. He was careful not to stray from the path incidentally. He ended up doing so on a few occasions, experiencing great difficulty in resuming his course. As soon as he got away, it was like the path distanced itself from him in an inversely proportional way. Each step off the path he took, he would need 5 to find it again. So he was careful to remain quite centered. On Rohan strode, up over the mountain where the cold came, but the clothes from his previous journey were more than sufficient for this change. His boots never gave out, and his knives remained sharp, despite frequent use against creatures as the tiger, lost in the night world, who came there in a way similar to Rohan. Over one spine of low mountains was a lake that was dying. It wrapped around a colossal cone of a creature, like those that leave shells upon the beach with the sound of the ocean inside their husks. It was half the size of the mammoth tree that drank of the knowledge sea. This was a conical creature, planted right in the center of the lake, but it was rising, and the sand near it looked lifeless with that anti-light color of the disembodied ones. Rohan did see 1 or 2 of the purple glowing things up close, perhaps without them realizing he watched, and they reminded him of common flies. Around the great shell there were forested hills, but like a scar or a sore or a leprous region, the center of the impression died with that violet mountain seashell. Rohan sensed that it too was growing. A river came from its mouth, a mouth that was mirrored like water and gaped wide as very bright violet lights flew in and out. The river ran down the slanted sand in the center of the scarred region, and it fed into the dying lake. The river was not one of water. The color was wrong, and its oddity was perceivable even from a distance, a certain indigo-violet shade like a poison. Where the poison river died, the end of the death was, and pristine waters stretched to trees again. But the poison was ever feeding into the lake, slowly destroying it as the malevolent seashell grew out of the sand in the center. Looking behind him along the path, Rohan could just make out the great tree shimmering in its varying glows like a static firework in the distance. It appeared to be on a far shore now. The path led him down the coast by way of mountain foothills. Judging by the size of what was behind, he must have come 3 or 4 days' journey. It was then Rohan noticed the tree was finally stabilized. It was indeed more gold than before around the trunk. He turned and continued along the path, up mountains, down mountains, through caves, across valleys, through deserts. He would hardly have the thought of hunger or thirst, and there was a stream, or a bush with berries, or a tree with almonds. Whatever he needed would be there, when he needed it. He wouldn't sleep much because it wasn't really necessary, and the dreams that came were not to his liking, but sometimes he would fall into a dreamless sleep for a time. This was rare, but did occur. After a while, he began to wonder if his eyes were stronger or if the sky were brighter, but he couldn't know. Being without a way to gauge time can be a maddening circumstance. The stars and moon were fixed and immobile, as though the universe were frozen. He had no timepiece, no cycle of days. The only thing available was his beard, which he noted seemed to be growing as usual. When he realized he could use this as a means of time measurement, he set to figuring out how long he was on the march. The beard had reached what felt like, around 3 months since he left his world, maybe 4. So maybe he did have a way of making time. He saw an increasing number of lost animals, roaming as was he, maybe also in search of the city of the Timeless One. They were feline mostly, but as Advaita said, there were now ways in and ways out of this place, this workshop of incomplete objects in the shed of the Timeless One. Rohan saw a miniature lion once, the size of a large dog rather than a lion, and of slightly different features. Like the tiger, which he first took for an uncommon lion, the animal was much altered. This little one wore no mane, only spots, large paws, and a clipped tail. It was covered in snow, and after a thump that turned Rohan's head, it jumped out of a bright window into another world in the middle of a rock face that was bare a second before. Almost immediately it vomited and was startled by Rohan into running at a full clip up the path and off into lesser trees. He noted, when the feline expurgated, that the window on his world closed. He wasn't even able to look in. Apparently opening such windows took something out of the felines. He couldn't help but be curious about passing through a portal like that again. He knew he was not supposed to return, but his mind did wander as the journey. Now and again he would look at the cube and see it differently. It was like he could perceive individual grains of gold apart from their brethren in the transparent artifact, but at the same time it was simply clear. He would quickly put it back within his cloak, blinking after images of its mystery away from his eyes. On occasion he saw clouds that were slow and kept their shape. He wondered if they were clouds at all or something else. He seemed to see islands with seas of sky in a dark moonlight twilight. He seemed to see islands with seas of sky in a dark moonlit twilight. Mostly these shapes occluded stars being just silhouettes, and none of the stars were in their places. Rohan noticed this long ago. He truly could not determine which direction, northeast, south, or west, defined his heading. He saw one other dragon, an old thing deep in a cave all along a stretch of coast where the path led him. Rohan locked eyes with the serpentine beast as he went, but it did not disturb him despite the gold in his pockets. It did make a rumbling noise and huff smoke, but as it raised itself to its shaking feet, it collapsed down again and made a deep rumbling moan of disappointment. Perhaps it too realized there was no need for hunger here in this world. And if there was no need for hunger, there was no need to discomfort itself in a long, uncomfortable chase with a mouse-sized human. But what if that human had gold? Ah, too much effort. Still, its eyes never left him as he continued on his way, following the path. He wondered if the interaction would have stayed as it did were he to leave the path, but decided not to test this whim. Insects seemed to have found the building place of the Timeless One and populated it. They were abundant and maintained their ravenousness. For whatever reason, they grew very large. Sometimes a firefly was a messenger from the Timeless One. Sometimes it was just a very big firefly. The spiders were seldom less than the size of his fist, and always ready to fight. Rohan made short work of them, but saw some very big ones along his way. He also encountered a bumblebee big as a goat. It attended to flowers and ignored him in the moonlight, but this thing spooked Rohan more than anything so far. Spiders were creeps, but they couldn't fly. No, I didn't imagine it, he thought to himself at a certain time, at least a year into the journey. His appearance was much altered. Eventually his garment did tatter, but there appeared an old bear too aged to fight. The beast came from a cave where a hole in the world must have been. It looked at Rohan and just died. Now Rohan wore a great cloak of bear hide that had its hood. Either Advaita anticipated his every need, or the Timeless One did, or it was a function of the path he didn't know. There was much time to think and much time to imagine. But he hadn't imagined this, he thought to himself, looking deep in the sky far ahead. It was definitely less dark than before. And Rohan could see something. It was like the boundaries of a road and took up a third of the horizon ahead, right against the earth, stretching straight forward into infinity. Rohan felt he could walk right to the stars on it. Imagine looking to an ocean, perceiving its curve in moonlight, and seeing stars silhouetting a highway into them, one whose distance couldn't be determined. It just disappeared into obscurity. He must have come a tenth of the way around this world or more by now to see such a change in the heavens. Indeed, he perceived new stars on the horizon as he continued his endless journey. Yet there was indeed a shape in the sky, like a road to the stars. He was not imagining it. There were colors, deep colors, the kind the eye loves to drink in, that of emeralds and rubies and sapphires and diamonds. And they made a line into the stars, a line to his right and a line to his left, perfectly straight, pointing to the cosmos beyond. That was where what light illuminated the night came from here. There was also a moon behind, almost under the horizon now. But compared to this, the first time he noticed these lines, he only saw what appeared to be elongated stars. As he continued along the path, they kept growing forward and outward, getting longer and wider. And now he noticed there was another sparkling line right in the middle of them. It was very much like a road bisected into two, made of glittering jewels leading right into the sky. Rohan knew of no constellation like that, but as he continued, it got brighter and brighter, stretching high above mountains as though it grew from them. And yet it seemed to widen and reach for him. He couldn't actually see its end. It widened to a third of the horizon toward the bottom. He thought these three faint lines in the stars stretched to a point, but he came to the conclusion he was seeing some sort of shape from an angle, and they rather dissipated into distance. Rohan would often ponder this mystery as he made his journey. A year with hardly sleep or food in a world of half-completed dreams and unknown time will affect the thinking. It is understood that where a person lives plays a role in their development. Where Rohan's life took him did indeed shape him and his thinking. His pace slowed, not out of necessity, but out of consideration. He began to think as he went on his way, and would pause to consider whatever came before him on the path, for he realized he was being shown things and taught things and given a chance to become more than he was. As yet, besides the dragon and a few skirmishes with other animals, there were no substantial trials, but that would soon change. As Rohan encountered the first human he had seen in this place. The path entered a forest, a very beautiful forest, and foreboding in moonlight, as the canopy filtered away the rays of the night's lesser light. But Rohan could see faint glowing among the trees, and on entry he saw mounds of mushrooms that offered an orange glow, and moss along trees under branches that likewise glowed faint indigo, giving him enough light to see 4 times the span of a man ahead of him and on all sides. After hours walking in these woods, his eyes were well enough adjusted he could see even further. That's when he encountered the old woman. It happened this way. Rohan saw a light in a hemisphere glowing a long way off in the woods. It glowed beyond the path, to the left 30 paces or so. But Rohan couldn't tell the precise distance. As he came closer, he saw above this hemisphere of light a putrid conglomeration of colors. It was the anti-light of the disembodied violet consciousness at the base of the knowledge tree, yet it was more. This light also wore every undesirable shade known to man, brown colors, moldy colors, putrid orange hues, roiling, flashing, fading, hurting his eyes. There was a chanting noise. It sounded like someone reciting titles of the fallen in a monotone. Then Rohan could see 2 inhuman blue eyes looking at him from the glowing maelstrom of rotten color, and he thought he saw a wicked grin. The light and the hemisphere disappeared. Beneath them was a woman, an older woman, fair of face but white of hair, lying amidst ferns on the forest floor with a tiny, tiny lion on her chest. It was the smallest lion Rohan had yet seen, less than the striped one or the spotted one. This one's coat was the purest white fur, very long, and its eyes were wide and blue. In front of it was a nasty little mound. Apparently it expurgated recently, leaving a mess on the tunic of the woman. She awoke and addressed this quickly, making many noises that were clearly admonitions to the miniature lion. Rohan froze, watching from the path 30 paces distant. He didn't expect she could see him, and he hadn't left from his way, but he could not help but wonder how she came to be in this place, and what the seemingly conscious roiling light meant in staring at him through putrefaction before disappearing with its glowing hemisphere, leaving only the woman behind. He watched her for a number of minutes as she went about collecting herself and securing the miniature lion within her tunic, where its furry face popped out on occasion, looking fearfully around before hiding again inside. Rohan was spellbound in curiosity, and so thankfully she had yet to see him. She went about gathering things until she found a stick of some variety, which she dipped in something he couldn't quite make out in the darkness. Then she removed a small box with a flint inside and applied a spark to her handmade torch. The light was intense to Rohan's adjusted eyes, which had seen nothing so bright, even when he spied the fallen grinning at him as it helped her transit. In whatever way it did, Rohan realized it was only fire, but he was astonished at its intensity. He froze, arms shielding against the brightness, and that's when she saw him, immediately making her way his direction and yelling out, "Tabiti!" Rohan didn't understand, but he felt his heart pounding and squinted at the woman with the torch. "Papios, I want to hear Danu." He caught words that had to do with water rich as fire and burning, something about protection or fatherhood. The woman was running to him now, pulling up her skirts to avoid the ferns. She was not without charms, but they were certainly muted by age. She came right up to him and looked in his eyes. Hers were pale, devious and wide. He could not place her family. She said, Damu patatabiti, Rohan Hanuman, patatabiti, dera pasa. Another who I know says my name. Another who I know not says my name. I am no fox, and water did not kill the burning one, Rohan said. He could parse her tongue but barely. It deviated impressively from anything he knew. But it was rooted in the language of the travelers of Lavina and Moksha. Papayos Moksha! Papayos Lavina! Did she read his mind? But then she pulled something from her pocket, some sort of powder, and would have blown it in his face, but he slapped her hand away. No! I cannot parse your tongue, old woman, but you should not be here. Go! He pointed back the way she came, then continued forward on his way. She stood behind a moment, looking at him quizzically, before stepping onto the path with him and following after. The miniature white lion poked its head out of her tunic and made a mewling sound, then pulled its head back in and started a low purring growl, though Rohan could still hear it make its mewling exclamations on occasion. The smaller the lions got, the bigger their eyes became. This one's were quite disproportionate in its miniature lion's head. Rohan wondered if the creature's brain were affected. He walked forward amidst looming silent trees and tried not to acknowledge the woman. She kept talking at him, and when she said his name, it was hard for him not to look back and meet her gaze. She would laugh and chatter on. Rohan was lonely, but now he wondered if his present circumstances were more perilous. He still couldn't understand her, though as he thought about it, owing to the water, he knew things about her that he shouldn't. He knew she came from the far north and the far west. He knew there was a sea he had never seen in his life, but it separated great lands of the earth. His sense told him she did not come from across that sea, but she may as well have, given her distance from his roots and his destiny. Even so, he couldn't help speaking with her a little, and it was about an hour later that she said, You are Kalandar. Rohan stopped. Now that I did understand, he turned. Yet I am not Kalandar, but this tongue I know. Ha ha! Now you understand, Rohan Hanuman, who killed the fire-breathing one with water and time to protect Lavina and Moksha in the land of promise to come. You are the spicer and the sly, failed kingslayer of the vagabond devil himself. You have the map! Mohan looked her in her hypnotic eyes. Which map? The map of the holes in the world. Rohan Hanuman, for 3 months have I prayed and sacrificed and slit myself in these arms. See these scars? The wise ones told me to find a feline with pure blue eyes and pure white coat, distant descendant of the great cats. I prayed to them, Rohan, and I caught these old arms and did dance in the blood of my enemies and the progeny who would destroy the children of Moksha, and I bathed. And I slept, the cat upon my chest, after eating the dried flesh of a bovine, in the chamber of the singing rocks, in the mountains far from man. And the wise ones heard me, and here I am, wise mother of the brotherhood of the dragon tail. Rohan wondered at the woman's words, saying, A short bearded striped lion opened the world for me, and I stepped through incidentally. I had no need for any wise ones. But you have the map, and you mean tiger. I have no map. What is tiger? But what of your scroll? Your words are true. Your witness is time. Rohan looked sideways at the woman. How do you know this phrase? She pulled from a satchel a tiny scroll, not that which Rohan made before, but which retained his words, expressed in another tongue. She read aloud from it, translating as she went, and as they walked, Rohan was glad for the conversational reprieve, though he knew she would follow and resume pestering him again shortly. Finally she finished and added, "The mother of the the mother of the travelers then came to a distant land and raised moksha. In later days, moksha has confirmed you took the map, long before traveler Mother Lavine arrived in the empty lands where you told her to go. By those who know it is known, you had on your person the map. You cannot trick me. Know you not what travails the brotherhood of the dragon's tail encountered in raiding the children of Moksha for even a copy of your scroll? How many of ours died, and how many of theirs died?" Rohan gestured ahead. "Do you see this path I am on?" The woman looked down, then looked up at him. "What path?" This abridged what Rohan intended to say. "You cannot see it." "I see no path," she said. "And yet there is a path," replied Rohan. "It is here, even as I walk along it, through these trees." "I cannot see it," she replied, walking ahead a little, and then getting off the path and heading into the trees. "It is not there. It is here," said Rohan. "Right here, through the wilderness. It is not visible to me." "But I see it," said Rohan. "I do not need a map." "Perhaps the map is in your mind. Look here, Rohan Hanuman." She held up the scroll, keeping the torch in arm's width away. The cat poked its white head out of her tunic as well. On the scroll was a square in front of a square at an angle, the edges connected. These made up a cube, which was represented in 3 dimensions on the animal skin in such a way, though it was truly flat. It was shaded lightly in gold. Many tiny dots were throughout the cube on the skin. Rohan looked up stunned for the first time, feeling a gripping weight in his gut. "Where did you say you got this?" "It is a copy of a scroll that was translated by Moksha himself, and he depicted the map of Rohan, which he only saw in his youngest years. It is the cube spoken of in your scroll, Rohan. You know of this, and you know where this cube is, this map of Rohan, and I have prayed to find you, so that I may have it, and I may know it." Rohan straightened, turned, and resumed his journey. "Why should someone simply provide you a great artifact of this variety?" "I have been through trial," rasped the woman, and her breath was terrible. "See these arms, see these eyes. Know you not what these eyes have seen in the darkness of the caves?" Trials you make for yourself in order to feed yourself are not trials. These are things you have done for you, for your own reasons. A trial is given from the Timeless One, to develop you, to make you, to grow you, to give you strength over time. Hardships you have by your own greed are no trial. If you survive them, you are lucky. Hardships that come when the right choice is made, these are true trials. A deep laughing came through the woods somewhere, and looking back, Rohan thought he saw something, but the fire of the torch she held blinded him. He threw it on the ground, stomping it out, squinting into the darkness. Points of blue, far away, watching. He turned to her. "You bring the rebels who broke mankind. These are who you contend with in your false trials. What is your name, woman?" "I am Circe of the North." "The name of your small lion?" "I have named him after you, Rohan." This distracted Rohan. It was far more pleasing to his mind than he would have supposed. "Circe, you cannot acquire the power of a map, as you speak of, with mere sacrifice. You must have both sacrifice and destiny." "If that were true, How did Star Tower, the undertaking, as you call ancient Babylon, come to be in the first place? How did it create the fleeing light? How was the undertaking abridged, Circe? The timeless one came, and now mankind has conflict of tongues and are become a scattered folk. There is a limit to all things, Circe, and there is yet a greater change coming on the world. She followed along in silence a while, though the woods showed no sign of dissipation. They seemed more amenable to her, and she began to see the glowing algae upon the base of trees. She was not defeated, but realized new tactics would be needed, and so an idea came to her. Do you not rest, Rohan? Do you not sleep? I have no need of sleep here. Have you felt hungry or thirsty since we have met? Can you not? I can if I desire. Then let us rest a while and talk, she said, sitting down on the path. No, Rohan continued walking. So she cajoled him and fired thoughts at him, and continued in this way the space of about 6 hours in total, at which point she became angry and turned and went back the way she'd come, letting her cat walk along beside her and hoping she could remember the sacred place through which she entered this world. When Rohan hadn't heard her voice a while and looked behind, he was glorified to see the old witch disappeared. He continued on many hours more in the woods, and they became more colorful in the darkness as he went, revealing plants that themselves were not but glow, and the occasional four-legged creature, little deer, who must have come to this world in ways Rohan could only imagine. There were few birds, but he saw more and more of them as he went along his journey. He felt his beard as he walked, wondering how much time passed since he found the woods, when there came a greater glowing ahead of him, and out popped the little lion with his namesake, who was nauseous on the ground. When the light of the portal slammed shut, Circe stood scowling. She was arrayed in quite royal colors, but though her face was painted in the style of an harlot, it did nothing to mask the age behind. She was skinnier than before, and came with an even more sly look in her sudden pale eyes. She said, I have passed many trials, and come for the map of Rohan, Hanuman, the Spicer, and the Sly. I have no map, Rohan returned. Do you know what things I have done since last I saw you? I do not, replied Rohan, feeling his eyes narrow. Do you know, we spent a year together here over these hours? For when finally I make the 6-hour journey back to the place where I came, having spent 12 hours in total here, and I at last compelled the wise ones to give little Rohan his inspiration to open the doorway, the word I regained thought me dead many months, as this little cat led the way down the hill. Villagers saw me afar, and did give obeisance, and have labeled me goddess, for I was goddess season in the winter hills, and it was known where I went, and they supposed I was dead, for when they sought me they found me not. I returned with little Rohan. The Brotherhood of the Dragon's Tail said I bound your soul in the cat and learned the power to transform people into beasts. Now she started to laugh as though it were all a joke, but then resumed seriousness. You know, I didn't even give them that impression. They came to it all on their own. But you have not discouraged that impression. Of course not. Why would I? I am their goddess, mistress of death, and you know, it has been over a year since I left you, Rohan. It has been hours. Here, not there, she cackled. Rohan felt that sensation in his stomach again. He had the look of one who weathered time since she had the look of one who weathered time since last he saw her, and it was much too great a weathering to be consolidated into a day's walk. She was too altered to have left and returned so quickly. Here was the mystery of the tiger and the dragon, and how they came on him so fast when first he entered this world. For the real world was slow, and this world was unbelievably quick. But how quick? Or did he have that backward? She was talking again. No, Rohan, an hour is a month, and 2 years fall away in a day here. Your world is unknown, and you walk a timeless track to the end of the universe, and you will reach it, though the world decay behind. So why should you? What a burden you have, divorced from humanity. Provide me the map, and be provided the relief. If she came several months ago, her words would have hit home. But Rohan's mind was changing. It was adapting itself to his new circumstances. A year without sleep is 2 years of wakefulness, maybe even 3, given that average night's rest only encompasses a third of the day. Rohan's mind had 2 to 3 years acclimation by now, and had begun to alter in its patterns from what he knew over 6 decades of life in the normal realm. So her temptation did not influence him as it could. He looked her in her eye, saw the darkness behind the wild, ready blue, and smiled sadly before looking forward and replying, "What I have is mine to have, not yours to take." "Then I will not take it," Circe returned, and she raised a reed to her lips. There was a thrumming noise in the world, and the note that she played along the reed swept out fast and hard and loud. Rohan looked behind and saw the coruscating anti-light of the fallen. Coming through the trees was a monstrous thing, spherical, violet, maligned, and full of incomprehensible shapes. It cast aside the trees and pushed toward him on the path. Rohan withdrew his saber and bellowed, "Stop in the name of the Timeless One!" The sphere high in the sky, lighting the whole forest, condensed and reduced and became a man 2 heads taller than Rohan, in black armor with blonde hair and piercing eyes. The man held out his hand. "Rohan, come save the world," it said. "This is not my task," Rohan replied, gripping his saber. "How do you know?" "Yes, Rohan," Circe said behind. "How do you—" "Silence, whore!" bellowed the fallen one. The violence of these words shocked even Rohan. She was a bit old for whoredom, certainly, and there was no reason to be so abrasive, but here was evil. It always terrorized its own. Circe paled past her default. Rohan turned back to the dark personality. "It is not my province to delegate." There was a moment's silence. Then Rohan ran at the glowing one who grew from the sphere of wicked light. Whatever it was manifested a defense weapon, and Rohan's saber met glowing metal. He struck at the monster fast and hard, and it stepped back to defend, but Rohan had fought the dragon and thousands of warriors. He could advance and retreat as a harpist plucks melodic strings. The fallen putrid one, that rebellious evil angel who dictated lives of the people of Circe, was very fast and very strong, but as Rohan was enabled in this liminal world between realities, the wicked angel was disabled, and so the two were matched. Rohan swung and parried, ducked, jumped, rolled, and pulled from the belt crossing his waist another dagger, now returning at the demon with a blade in each hand, slashing and hacking away. The battle was fierce, and Rohan was injured in his left arm. It didn't immediately abridge his attack. He would fight until the end. Sorry about that. It didn't immediately abridge his attack. He would fight until the end. Suddenly the armored, blonde-haired beast disappeared, and Rohan was alone in the darkened forest. Far behind he heard Circe laugh and laugh and laugh, and when he looked she faded away through a glowing oval in the forest. Rohan realized he lost the path. "Timeless One!" he bellowed, and heard nothing. Then he saw a glow far away, and in a direction he did not expect. "Rohan," said the soft glowing light. and in a voice Rohan recognized. It was Advaita, who stood in one place. Rohan followed his voice and came to that place, and saw behind Advaita the path stretching away into woodlands. The messenger said, "You must not leave the path, Rohan," and disappeared into darkness. "I didn't," Rohan mumbled, but he knew what was meant. The witch and the demon tricked him, and they did so quite brilliantly in a way that involved the probable necessity and provocation of a subtle kind. He thought he heard laughter in the distance, but it must have been in his mind. Rohan continued on, favoring his left arm, realizing the damage done. It never did heal right. He was still no slouch in battle, but this was the first real brick in a wall of physical maturity. Many more years would come, and many more bricks would be added to that wall before his journey reached its conclusion, but this was the first. Soon Rohan came out the other side of the forest, finding himself on a plain of rock. Some were small, some of the rocks large, but all without greenery, none that he could see. Rohan knew this boulder field continued for some distance, but he couldn't see how far it went. He only knew the path in front of him, stretching into twilight under the moon. The moon was closer to the horizon than he remembered, and he regarded it for perhaps an hour, assuring himself that indeed it seemed to be sinking. Without warning, yet again came Circe. This time he saw the oval come ahead of him, and the old woman limp from it. The tiny lion with her looked ragged, and she looked gaunt.
A famine came in the land of Mizraim, and you rode the tree to your path amidst the pain. Only a year ago in your time. Do you know how long in mine?
"Go home, Circe," Rohan said. "Die in peace."
Give humanity the map of Rohan. Save humanity from the designs of evil elder gods.
"I do that already, witch," Rohan replied, and made a single movement with his sword. She fell, eyes wide, but instead of becoming overgrown with flowers as had the dragon, she shriveled and wrinkled and became dust in the shape of a body. A dark purple light that sometimes flashed green flowed from her and drifted away over rock like a putrid blinking vapor. The cat was at her feet. When she fell, it ran upon her and placed its paws on sand and yowled, confused. And then it got a certain look in its eye, began scratching at the sand, and squatted down. Rohan laughed aloud. The cat finished its task and ran away over rocks and back toward the forest fast as its furry little legs could take it. "You have become the realm of cat fodder, Circe. You should not have aligned yourself with the fallen." And he continued forward. But from his interaction with Circe, he started to notice certain things along his journey. Many more portals came and went in silhouette of his path. Rohan learned things from some of these necromancers, wizards, and hags who traveled to the Liminal Era, hidden from the realm of men. But if they had ambitions for the golden crystal cube, he would immediately resist them until they either fled or he ended them out of necessity. For some reason, the fallen could only do so much to inconvenience him. He wasn't sure if this was because they didn't truly know he had the cube or not. He never revealed he held it, and the only evidence was the word of Moksha, a grandson who, through Circe, Rohan realized must be long dead by this time, for if an hour were a month, how many months and years were already gone by? He felt his beard holding it out in front of him. It reached to his belly now, which was taut and had no fat whatever. 2.5 years, he muttered. If an hour is a month. Rohan looked up. The number was something over 1,500 years since he began his journey. So the song went out, and he was legend among the wizards of the world. Many knew of Circe. Somehow they kept finding Rohan. They identified a certain pattern to the portals. He wondered at this, and it was his assumption their discovery was more than likely synthetic, fed to them by the fallen like breadcrumbs to trap waterfowl. The night was ever brighter as he went, until at a point when by the length of his beard he could tell he was on the road between 17 and 1800 years, everything changed. Rohan was at a point where he knew about what length of beard a year was, and so while walking would take a knife to his beard, pull away the hair, and let it fly in the gentle breezes of the low light. That's how he wound the clock. He had just done this when everything went wild. Down in a valley was another of the fallen monster seashells, this one bigger than any Rohan had yet seen. Again the ground bowed up all around, but it did not have the spiral shape of the other. It was feathered like wings closed together to shroud a pearl. The giant mouth opened, and Rohan expected to see a shining sphere like the moon. What he saw were 12 bright lights, putrid in coloration, dancing around in a circle. And they were singing a dark song, an atonal song, something primal. There was laughter, and it was pure malevolence. What evil makes the demons dance, Rohan wondered, brushing errant whiskers from the beard he just trimmed. Then somebody turned on the lights. The moon behind was already quite low, and the stars increasingly faint. Now they were gone, and the sky was shades of pre-dawn pink, and the light was brighter than ever, and came from ahead, from the lines in the sky. The path to the stars. Rohan had to shield his eyes, and the putrid song stopped immediately. The wavering glow of the fallen faded away in the glory of coming dawn. The evil ones rose from the massive seashell, and its mouth closed. Rohan could see faces growing larger from where he stood at the edge of the valley. They were faces contorted in fear, confusion, and pain, and they made screeching devil noises. Their bellows were drowned out, and there came a thunderclap and lightning of a kind Rohan had never known. He hadn't even noticed the storm sweeping in. But it rolled forward from behind him, the first of its kind he encountered in that place without time, the workshop of the Timeless One. The thundering was constant, and no cries of fear or confusion could compare. The faces of the fallen faded away, as did their protestations and their song and their voices, and then they were gone, replaced with rain, a sweet, sweet rain. Rohan looked to the sky, then down at the closed sea thing, and where his path led him. It went right over and past the monster, to the other end of the rounded depression, a lake once. Water was coming, filling what the demons stole with their machinations on the overgrown seashell, but recovery would take time. You have done well, Rohan, said a voice. Rohan turned. A man walked beside him, with a peaceful expression and deep kindness in his eyes. Continue your task. And when you've reached the far side of the valley, drink the water, for the tongues will return. Rohan felt his heart pounding. Who are you? I am, replied the man. His raiment white, face like the sun. Rohan fell to his knees. You are the Timeless. Yes, Rohan. And the world has changed. You believe in me. Yes, Lord, cried Rohan. There are two in this world you do not know. I must meet them before I go. You will not encounter them here. You will encounter an innocent one who will waylay you. Suffer her, then continue to my city. See, it grows in the sky. And he who was the Timeless gestured ahead, where the path led. In his hand was a horrible wound. But the beauty beyond made Rohan forget the broken flesh in an instant. He could see the gemstone starway now more clearly than before. Now he realized those vibrant colored lines weren't stars. They looked ever more like the boundaries of a road, but had become more defined. It was as though a road stretched from the curve of the earth and faded deep into space, falling invisible with length. The beauty of it struck Rohan in his heart and soul. They stuck there as well, like nothing before. And it was no trouble to fix his gaze on that road into the sky, that gemstone highway to the stars, the coming city of God. Then he who was the timeless went where he said he would. It was many hours before Rohan reached the other side of the lake bed with the titanic seashell textured as two wings clasped together. There Rohan saw a stream and noted that it babbled to the sea along which his path so often followed. He knelt and drank, and his mind knew words it never perceived in the old world. And so Rohan continued his trek, having reached the halfway point, but knowing there was still a great journey ahead. He fought more dragons and pagans, but the fallen now left him alone, for he took on a new spirit after meeting the timeless one. But he noticed things in the sky. In the breaking dawn there were chariots made of fire that crossed between heaven, with demon horses at their helm. These slowly changed, becoming vast winged things, and then curved circular things. One of them came to Rohan late in his journey, a journey with so many encounters the writing of them would be too much for 100 volumes. What Rohan saw in this twilight of his trek was a large thing, circular like a tower. Unlike a tower, it flew on its side, and had many smaller segments, like many fat plates connected together. It came in front of him on the path and settled down over gently swaying grasses. A little gray entourage came from the cylinder with black eyes and no clothes or sexual characteristics. They used slits for nostrils and looked unsettling in the twilight. They spit fear at him and sent ideas to his very mind. "We are from the stars in the sky," they said. "Dance with us in the dance of the stars and learn to conquer dying." But Rohan knew they lied, and so said, "If you have conquered dying, you are the greatest beings that exist." "Yes," and they positively beamed. "If you are the greatest beings, then none are over you." "This is the case," came their thoughts. But Rohan felt the lie. They were as the false giant that became air when Rohan's saber pierced its foot, an illusion. He said, "Then I say by the timeless one, begone!" There was a surprised shrieking sound in his mind, and they imploded. The bodies of Grey collapsed, becoming like slimy cloth on the grass, and beginning to effervesce away into the air. Then greasy green spheres slowly rose from the voided bodies of the knot-men, and came together, and shot into the sky, followed by the sideways tower and its malevolent aura. Rohan laughed and resumed his journey. He came across a third mountainous shell creature, like the other wicked things, but it was surrounded in water and dead. He came across a fourth that was not. Some of the fallen were vanquished, some had abandoned old ambitions, some had confederated together. Those strange cylinders came and went from the mountainous seashell. They were like streams of traffic to and fro, but in the sky. The dark ones grew their starways. Rohan saw in the cylinders the theft of the knowledge of man. For these things that were like violet flies in the night and cast shadows on the mind, they were not wise enough to make such leaps in creation. They were mimics and frail, traitorous weak servants in a great household seeking to undermine its master, and failing continually until at length such wicked servants would be dealt with. They had no abilities of their own, and could only imitate what man did, then repurpose those human mimicries. As Rohan drank of the waters, he remembered things of the new world, things he had not seen. And such things would be more clear in dreams, so now he would sleep on occasion. He would take such rest for no other purpose than the dreams, which in the world before the dawn were now sweet. So he continued, walking, thinking, stopping to observe that which came across his path, resisting those who sought to steal the golden crystal cube, and seeing the great gemstone highway to the stars become ever larger, ever brighter, ever wider, ever more substantial as he went. From this city of the Timeless One came the light courting dawn, and it only grew brighter as he traveled on. It came to dominate the horizon, even though he was still months away by the length of his beard, for knowing the halfway point of the journey, he could now estimate its remainder. The structure's reflective surface made psychedelic portraits of the world it reflected, broken by stones of all color and preciousness beyond measure in perfect array. And it was at this period along his journey that a young Japanese girl with innocence in her eyes and clouds in her mind stepped from a portal following a cat with a silky black coat and a paw of white. She walked right onto the trail he followed, right in front of him, and though too shy to meet his eye, looked at him sideways. She had a smile that kept trying to force its way out, even as she pulled on a veneer of toughness. The innocent one. She said, holding back the smile, "Who are you?" "I am Rohan Hanuman, the stoic, the sly, the spicer, whelp of the mighty hunter, and would-be king slayer." She held out her hand to him sideways and said, "Himari Fujimoto." Rohan gravely and gently took her hand and bowed in a chivalrous way, sensing a real soul without guile in ways he never could have described. It was a person who had no business in this liminal world, for in his time he was changed by the place, and his eyes saw what no man did, growing from that knowledge. What could she be doing here in such a world? Rohan met her eye with some effort and asked, "How have you come here?"